Oh, hey there. Happy Hump Day, everybody. Welcome to another Workshop Wednesday. Got a whole bunch of questions for you. Well, you guys have a whole bunch of questions for me. I've got a whole bunch of answers for you. And fruity drink today. Cheers. This one's free. Do you guys want fruit punch or peach? You know what? I get fruit punch. You can have a peach.
Fruit punch is not good.
You say fruit punch is not good?
No. You like that taste?
I don't mind it. First and foremost, thank you very much for all of the questions and the recommendations. Got a whole bunch of ideas for different Workshop Wednesdays. Well, can't even call them Workshop Wednesdays. What's Up Wednesdays, all kinds of different Wednesdays. But for today, let's get into some questions. From Aviva Hadas, a bunch of recommendations and some questions at the bottom. Route planning. This is kind of a strange one because not a whole lot is planned. First of all, I'm incredibly familiar with all these routes up here now. So I know where the fuel stops are, where I can get water, where I can dump the tanks, where I can get groceries. And I know how far the rig can go on fuel. So I don't have to plan a whole lot of that stuff. Ocean trips are heavily planned. How far we're going, what route we're taking, how much fuel we're gonna need, weather, tide, all of that is planned. How often am I stopping to get drone footage? How is YouTube video capturing planned? I stop a lot to get drone footage. I don't necessarily plan how the YouTube video goes because I don't know how the day or how the adventure is gonna go. I have somewhat of an idea of the location or the story I'm pursuing, but as far as the video itself, it's kind of just run and gun, film what happens along the day, and then when I get to editing, I start into building a storyline. But I've been doing this for quite some time now, so as I'm exploring for the day, I know what I need to capture to build that storyline. So a certain amount of B-roll and a certain amount of A-roll, myself talking about what's happening and walking you guys through the day. Black tank, how do you plan to dump since you never go to RV parks? When you do this for a long time, you get really good at identifying that little sign that is the sandy dump station. And kind of a question that a lot of people don't like to talk about, but going to the bathroom. I use the outdoors for the bathroom quite a lot, so the tanks don't actually have to get dumped all that often. Have you ever had the feeling of being watched or any strange sounds, etc.? Not necessarily. I hate to say this, but I'm not really a believer in the paranormal. I love the idea of Sasquatch, and ghosts is kind of an interesting thing. It's not something that I really believe in. I can kind of think myself into getting scared or think my way into hearing things, but if you just take a moment and think about it, a lot of it I find is easy to explain. So no, I don't really get those feelings, and usually if I'm out exploring, I'm in a place that's so far away from anything. If there's anything watching me, it's probably a bear or a cougar, which has probably happened. Okay, we covered the beginning of this question, but what do I get up to in the winter? I do this all year. The last couple of winters have been pretty taken up by building and maintaining this truck. So the first winter, 4 months went into building, the next 2 months went into kind of finalizing, and then a lot of trial and error. This winter had to go into a whole bunch more stuff, drop the transmission, new flywheel, new clutch, rebuilt the top end of the engine, and then kind of tidied up a lot of the stuff that I didn't have time for last season. If you don't follow the channel closely, this might just look like a truck and camper. There's a whole lot happening behind the scenes here that has to get maintained or built. So that's taken up my winters, but Destination Adventure has been my full-time business for almost 4 years now. Great question. How do I find and choose the music that I feature on the channel? I should probably do a whole Wednesday episode just about music, but that's something that I put a ton of time into. Rarely do I choose the music before the adventure. Usually the adventure happens, and then depending on what happened throughout that experience, I try and find songs that are going to fit the emotion that I'm trying to portray to the audience. So I pay for every licensing platform that's available online, and each different platform has many thousands of songs, and you can go through genre, or you can put filters on and go through the music like that, whether you want lyrics or not. Oftentimes I'll download a song, both the instrumental and the lyrical version, and then I'll kind of blend and make my own. So if I'm interviewing somebody or I'm talking, I'll pace everything out so that the sections that I want lyrics, there's nothing happening related to the storyline. And then if somebody's talking, I'll cut that section out and mix in the instrumental and build my own song kind of like that. Okay, couple questions in here. I'll answer the second one first. Have I sold the moho yet? Yes, I sold the motorhome. Actually, it sold on the first day. And if COVID didn't come, would I still be doing the cruise ship thing? That's a great question. I don't think I would still be on cruise ships. By the end of my last contract, I had climbed as far as I could within the company. I was video manager and had some amazing contracts, had traveled all around the world, 54 countries. And I was kind of ready for the next step in my career. And I was actually working on trying to transition into expedition ships. I had a neat little opportunity with Lindblad Expeditions, the company that partners with National Geographic expedition ships. And unfortunately that fell through right before COVID, and then I kind of took a chance at this whole YouTube thing. So would I be doing YouTube if COVID didn't happen? Probably not. I think I'd be on an expedition ship, but I'm very happy with the direction that my life is going. And regardless of what happens to YouTube, I've gathered enough experience about running business that I think this is all translatable into something else. But I hope I can continue this career path for quite some time. What have I changed over the years? I wouldn't say I've changed much. I've changed my entire rig, so that's pretty awesome. I've definitely dialed in how to live this lifestyle for sure. How to generate power, how to store it, carry water, source everything. So I've gotten better at that, but it's just been a process of learning it, not necessarily changing anything. How do I maintain the rig? Oil changes and roadside fixes. Well, in this compartment here is all of my specialty tools. I can build anything from brake lines to gaskets and all kinds of stuff on the road. Oil changes I actually get done in a shop on the road if I need to, but these trips aren't really taking me all that far. So for a season, I might only need to do one oil change. So if I can stop somewhere and get some oil, it's easy enough to drain it and then stop at a facility where I can drop off my oil. And roadside fixes I just do on the roadside. Oh, and what I think I want to change, not much. Got her dialed in pretty good. Okay, how do I get awesome leads and amazing interviews? Great question. Leads come from just having done this now for so long. I'm in a great position where I've been exploring and promoting these really remote communities, and the locals really appreciate that. So when I roll into town, folks will recognize me from previous seasons or send me messages after I leave, kind of tipping me off on some of the local secrets. And a lot of research goes into it as well. And especially this ocean stuff, I've gotten really good at identifying things from the ocean that lead me to believe there's more behind the tree line. And I have a boat that is really easy to just pull up on shore and start looking around in the trees. So I find a lot of stuff just organically, and the rest of it does come from leads and research. In the early years, it was a lot more research than leads. In the latter years now, I'm kind of chasing what people are putting out for me, which is really, really nice. How do I get the amazing interviews? Well, I'm always working. I never am approaching somebody like, hey, can I interview you? I'm going to these remote communities and go to the bar, go to a restaurant, just spark up conversations. Oftentimes people will start asking me because they're interested in the truck. And then as soon as I identify a storyline and whoever I'm talking to, I'll kind of steer the conversation towards, hey, can I interview you? So that's how a lot of that works. And it oftentimes doesn't come quickly. And a lot of it does come from having support from these communities. I interviewed Lady Mary here in Stewart, the longest living resident in Stewart. That came from visiting with fans that are her caretaker, and one thing led to the next, arranged an interview. Okay, touched on a lot of this already. How do I pick the locations? Well, I pick a final destination and then some key points in between, and then whatever I can find along the way is kind of how that works. How do I find people to interview? We've covered that one. And am I considering any trips outside of BC again? Currently en route to the Arctic Circle, so that'll be Yukon and Northwest Territories. And this winter, of course, it's going to be winter time again, so not so ideal in the rig. We will be pursuing other options. Not entirely sure what they are yet, but outside of British Columbia, almost certainly. Do I have any plans on traveling down to the United States again? Great question, and unfortunately not really. Running this business is a complicated thing in the United States because Destination Adventure is a registered business in British Columbia, Canada, so I pay Canadian taxes. As soon as I cross the border and start filming it in the United States, I also owe tax in the United States. Even with the business as is, producing it in Canada, I have US and Canadian tax obligations, but it gets far more complicated once I cross the border into the United States. So unfortunately, I don't have plans of traveling the US very much. Anything of note, I would like to explore Northeast Canada. I would like to explore all of Canada. It's just time. It's a huge country, and I've got a lot of places I want to check off in this lifetime, so I will do basically all of Canada over time. Right now, it's not quite in my cards to be going east quite yet, but it is coming. And have I ever considered one of those moose catcher bumpers? Yes, that's the next thing I'd like to get built for this truck, is a bumper that can handle a large animal impact. It's just these things are expensive, and I can't spend money that takes away from the travel and the production of the show. So the bumper's on the list, but it's got to wait. Okay, more about trip planning. Maybe I should do a whole video about trip planning. Seems to be a lot of interest there. Thank you for these questions. Let's just cover where to stay. This is kind of a challenging one because in most parts of the world you can't just camp anywhere. You have to book a spot or stay on someone's private property or something. Traveling here in the north, it's an amazing experience because you can kind of stay wherever you want. There's a ton of beautiful lakes and rivers with access and large areas to park and camp. It seems that a lot of people are really respectful about it, so we don't have big heaps of garbage or anything, so hopefully that will continue well into the future. But I don't research a whole lot of where to stay because at this point I kind of know where I want to stay, and there's spots that I've been eyeing up for years that I haven't had the chance to get to, so it's exciting every year going north. Like, ooh, today we can finally get to that spot that we missed last year. Got a bunch of questions in one here. Do folks live near where I'm filming and visiting adventuring? If so, what's it like to live there? Oftentimes people do live here. I'm in Stewart, BC right now, and I think it's a great little life. When I get a chance to interview people, I do interview what life is like in these locations. Sometimes I am many hundred kilometers from where people live, but you never know. There's a lot of bush people out there, and I'm sure they're loving life too. Do I drink? Occasionally I drink. What do I do to manage the bugs? Well, let me rephrase this question. Dustin, what's your superpower? My superpower is I do not get a reaction to bug bites. So I do nothing to mitigate the bugs. I let them bite me, and then they go off on their merry way, and I go off on mine. I get no reaction to mosquito bites or anything. So honestly, it doesn't really bother me that much. But I'm starting to see the other side of it because Emmy gets a horrendous reaction to bug bites. So we've been trying to deal with that, and it's been less than successful. How can a person without an overlanding rig like yours make the journey to some of your favorite spots? Honestly, you could get to many of these spots with a car. Maybe I wouldn't recommend a car, but just a small pickup truck would be totally fine. Probably two-wheel drive even. The only time this thing ever goes into four-wheel drive is if I need low range. I've never actually needed it to get out of a sticky situation or a slippery situation. So the only reason I have this is because I live in this all the time. This is full-time home and business for me, so I need something that is comfortable long-term. But you could get to many of these places with your average daily driver. Well, this is a very nice comment, thank you. And I do not meditate or do anything to maintain my mental health. Maybe I should a little bit more. But this whole operation keeps me very busy. I don't come from any type of business background, so learning how to run a business has been stressful and challenging, as well as this is an artistic pursuit for me, and the more I get involved in it, the more I'm passionate about how the product is. So as the years go by, I have to invest more and more time into editing. So I don't really have a whole lot of time for meditation and whatnot, but I stay pretty active with this lifestyle, and I think that helps. As far as dealing with the struggles that come my way, like the catastrophic ones, I just don't have any other option. So that's actually when I function the best, is when there's a big problem in front of me. I can just focus in, get it done. It's the little problems that really haunt me. What does the mundane day-to-day look like? There is no mundane anything. It is either filming or editing or researching or traveling. Well, a little bit of eating in there too, and some sleeping. But yeah, I think there's probably going to be some questions in here about what happens behind the scenes. You guys see everything pretty much, except for me sitting and editing for many hours. Got a horse fly. Got a bunch of questions in one. How do you afford to do what you do? It seems like you are always on the road. That is precisely how I afford it. Again, this is full-time home and business for me. So Destination Adventure is business that allows this lifestyle to continue forwards. What was your last job and what made you hit the road versus the social norm? I think we covered this, but I'll rewind once further. I was a heavy equipment operator at a lumber mill in Williams Lake before a video producer on Princess Cruise Line. Kind of a contrasting careers. And that's why I never went back to the social norm, because when you get paid to travel the world, you realize just how great life can be. And then COVID came along, and I was very much unwilling to go back to the mill, so I was going to exhaust every resource and every bit of savings I had to make this financially viable. If money, time, and sheer ability were not an issue, where would you want to explore the most? That's a tough one, because I've been to 54 countries. A lot of them, actually all of them, I would like to do again. Outside of that, I'm pretty focused on the current road ahead, so I don't really have a top 5 for that, unfortunately. What is your top 10 or so absolute must-have in a truck if someone wanted to do one of the trips like you did? I would say to have in a truck, geez, 10 things. You don't need 10 things to do this trip. You need the truck, you need a bed, a way to cook, a way to store electricity, a way to generate electricity. You need drinking water. Outside of that, bathroom and shower, big plus. If money and time were not an object, what would you change about your setup? Truck, camper, boat, etc. Probably nothing. It's if you look on the market, it's going to cost you $1 million to get something that is as capable as this truck. A lot of people thought I was silly going with an old rig. There's a very specific reason. The power plant and drivetrain in this truck will outdo any modern vehicle. So if money was not an option, I would have bought some not discount parts when I did the build, and that's pretty much it. Great question. How do I know if the rig can get into these places and if I can turn around? I absolutely do not know. Oftentimes I'm just going off a recommendation or going off my Backroads map book, and I'm just going for it. Cool thing about this is it's built on a conventional cab chassis, so if I get into a sticky spot, I unhook the trailer, I can turn the truck around, and I do travel full-time in this, so I'm quite good at backing it up. I can back up many kilometers if necessary, but it rarely happens. No more about my background. There will eventually be a video that will cover my entire background. It's a story that's far too long to answer in a Q&A. What's the hardest part of transitioning to a nomadic lifestyle? For me, it was not hard. I was so ready for a change in my life, and I think I was very much built for this type of lifestyle. I can tell you, it is absolutely not the lifestyle for everybody, but for the right person, it's incredibly enjoyable and rewarding. The hardest part is just getting used to how everything works. When I moved into the motorhome, I didn't realize that you can't plug something into the socket and charge it. you need a generator or plugged into shore power or some type of inverter. So just figuring out how all of that stuff works and learning how little you actually need to be comfortable and happy. And lucky for me, I need very little. How do I keep from getting lost hiking in the woods? Good question. I have a great mental compass. So I do carry with me a physical compass and a GPS, and depending on where I am, sometimes a map. But I've not once in my life had to use it, which is pretty great. But out on the ocean, it's a different story because the fog can roll in, so a GPS is a necessity, so you don't wreck yourself into shore. But as far as being in the woods, it's crazy. I can hike all over the place and somehow manage to find myself on the exact same tracks coming home. Another kind of repeat question here, but how do I find my interviews and how is it usually well received? It is almost always well received, which is great. Occasionally somebody is happy to sit down for a conversation, but they don't want the camera there. That's always a disappointing day for me, but I love to just hear about people's stories, learn about different lives all around the world. So even if they don't want the camera there, we sit down and we have a great conversation regardless. Am I gonna work on the inside of the camper? Not really, because there's nothing wrong with the inside of the camper. I just need things to function in my life. I don't need them to be fancy. So I've done some upgrades in there, redone the water system, put in an air conditioner and a better refrigerator, did some blinds and some basic things, put in a smart TV. That's pretty radical. But everything else, it's fine as is. I like the old wood. Really enjoy your trip to Mexico. Thank you, I appreciate that. Do I plan on coming this way again anytime soon? I would love to do another Mexico season, especially because I have a ton of connections down there and I have a rig that can handle it much better than the motorhome. So another Mexico season would be the tits. Cool tires, what are they? Good question. These are Saloon Terramax mud terrains, specific for the Arctic season. And a lot of people criticize the Saloons because they're knockoff tires. I bought my first set of Saloons because I could not afford anything else, and they lasted really, really well. So when I built this rig, I went into some all-season Saloons. They lasted, well, honestly, they didn't last very well, but I was having some front-end issues on the truck, but I didn't get a single flat, and I was saving people that had flat tires all over Haida Gwaii, and this truck lived like a month in the Alpine with those. So this season, I went with a little bit more of a rugged terrain tire, and I think they're a 10 ply. It's the most you can get for this 16-inch rim, and I've been super happy with them so far. The guy at the tire shop told me that these more aggressive lugs are gonna wear even worse than the all-terrains. They've been wearing perfectly, and the truck is true as can be down the road, so really happy with these tires so far. Daily life, how you manage washing up. Long rain spells must be boring. How do you stay entertained? I have an endless workload just in editing and maintaining the whole social media side of this thing, so boredom is never an issue in my life. How do I manage washing up? I've been seeing a lot of questions from folks asking how we do laundry and shower and stuff. The reason I built with a full-size camper is because this has a full bathroom shower in it, so that's where we do the washing. The only thing about showering is we are on somewhat of a schedule because water consumption is somewhat of a challenge. Laundry is done at laundromats almost all of the time, and fans' houses, actually. That's one of my great offers that I get, is to come for a shower and laundry. And Emmy's a little bit less comfortable with that, but she's just new to the lifestyle. She'll get used to it. You've traveled all over. Any ghost stories, weird encounters, being abducted by aliens? None of the above, unfortunately. Love to have a wild encounter. I do have encounters with wildlife, but nothing too crazy yet. Hope to keep it that way. Okay, what happened to the Trials bike? Is there a proper motor in the future or just e-biking? I seized the engine on the Trials bike, actually going up to past Salmon Glacier here in Stewart, and that's been on the list for the winter projects for 2 years now, and I just haven't had time to rebuild the top end of that engine. As far as a proper motorbike in the future, I would love to. These e-bikes have been great because they've been sponsored items, so I don't have to pay for it. And but the range is a big issue for me because I'm going way up in the mountains. Like, this thing's marketed for 124 kilometers. The way I'm riding it, I get maybe 60 kilometers, probably closer to 40. So I'd love to have a motorbike in the operation, but the problem right now is the trailer. This is just an old boat trailer that I've broken and rebuilt a ton of times, and it's working great for what it is, but it has a huge long reach. It makes it very easy to back up and very friendly to drive with, but I can only put so much weight on this rack, so I don't have an option for a proper motorbike right now, but I would really like to do a proper trailer build in the future and then incorporate an actual motorbike into the operation. Want to see British Columbia in the wintertime? Yes, British Columbia is beautiful in the wintertime. I don't have a whole lot of plans for winter because, again, I do live in this full time, and winter is just a huge challenge for keeping batteries warm, keeping enough fuel for the diesel air heaters, and I would love to get up and do some snowmobiling, but I can't make a whole season out of something like this because it's just beautiful views up there. Any of our history up in the mountains during the wintertime is buried under many feet of snow. So I don't have a whole lot of plans, but there are some Canadian winter destinations that I do have on the list. Just have to find a way to safely make that happen. How hard is it to live remotely? Any funny stories about living remotely? It's not hard. It's hard for some people for sure. I really love it. I love going remote. Funny stories, probably not many. You spend a lot of time thinking that you own the whole wilderness when you don't see anyone for many days, and sometimes you end up outside not fully clothed and all of a sudden people are there. So there's been a couple of those experiences, but outside of that, nothing too funny. How many miles total have you transversed? Interesting choice of words. Geez, I don't know, a lot. A couple 100,000 for sure, but I couldn't tell you exactly how many. And that's not including cruise ships, because I've circumnavigated the globe 2 times. That's a lot of miles, kilometers actually. Have you started any planning for the next rig? I do not plan on having a next rig. I hope that this rig can keep me going for a long time. I know basically everything about it. I can rebuild everything that's on this thing. I know the thing I'm concerned about is this old camper, unfortunately. That's what I could afford when I started the build, and luckily a new camper by the same company or a Northern Light would fit these boxes exactly the same, but hopefully that day doesn't come. I think the next big build or transition will probably be onto a boat or a ship. Great question. How many hours of filming and editing does it take for a 30-minute Saturday episode? That can vary drastically because, let's just give an example, Telegraph Creek from last year, where I'm incorporating 3 different interviews into one storyline and then a whole bunch of B-roll and everything on top. It can take many, many hours, but a good rule of thumb is a 30-minute video is probably 30 hours of editing, somewhere in there. Some of these videos are really easy though. I go out, I can have a nice little cinematic introduction or something, and then a lot of it is just walking around the location. I've tried videos where I get super cinematic and I don't even walk around with the GoPro, and people don't seem to like that quite as much. So a lot of these ones where I don't have an interview or something, I try and make it easier on myself and hopefully enjoyable for the audience, and just kind of walk around with the camera, talk about what I'm seeing. And it seems to be a little bit more authentic when I'm finding something. The reaction is right there on camera. I don't have to go back and try and reenact anything, because that's not what this show is supposed to be about. Man, really enjoy your videos. Just signed up to Patreon. Anybody else? Great question. First of all, great big thank you. And the answer to your question is hopefully everybody else. We would like to understand how your Starlink internet is working, how you set it up and take it down. We've found a bit of cable and connectivity issues when we reset it. Yes, the internet is working great for me. I had those same issues as you when I purchased it. I think it's the 2nd gen Starlink, the rectangle one. A lot of them came from the factory with kind of a faulty cable. So if you're not really easy on it, you'll get that connectivity issue. You just have to send a message to Starlink and they'll send you a new cable free of charge. There goes Darcy. It's worked great for me, and I haven't had a single issue since I replaced the cable. How I set it up and take it down. I kind of played with the thought of hard mounting that thing when I built this rig, but I really enjoy being disconnected. These trips that I take for more than a week off grid, I do it intentionally because I want to be away from service, away from the cell phone, away from everything. And to operate this business, I do need the internet. So when I stop at night, the Starlink goes up on that pole you see at the back of the rig. And when I fire up in the morning, it gets taken off and everything's sealed in the pole. And that Starlink cable is wired right down into my EcoFlow in here. So I just put the Starlink in the top and it's all wired in and ready to go. What type of fuel mileage you get, how large is my tank, and how do I schedule fuel stops, especially when you're very remote? This truck, part of why I wanted this chassis is because of the 12 valve Cummins. I'm getting just a little bit better than 20 miles per gallon. Sorry, I don't know what that is in liters per 100. How large is my fuel tank? It's the stock tank that came in the truck. Being a cab chassis, maybe it's larger than a conventional fuel tank, but honestly, I don't know. I fuel up basically every fuel stop, so I've never really gone to empty. Oh, and how do I schedule my fuel stops? So I don't. If I'm remote, I'm fueling up literally every single fuel station. Doesn't matter what price, doesn't matter how empty the tank is, the truck's getting fueled up. But I can get, depending on hills and headwind and all that, somewhere between 650 to 800 kilometers per tank. How's the crankcase vent system working? That you added during the winter? Any issues with oil getting in the air filter, or is it working better than you planned? Thanks for the mechanical question. The crankcase vent system is working great, but I have changed a few things. It was not saturating the filter in oil, but there was oil getting on the filter more than I had expected. So I've actually run it down to a catch can, and I have two vents now, the one coming out from the tappet cover and then the secondary vent from the oil fill tube. They both run down into an oil catch can, and it's been working great. The tappet cover, absolute dumpster fire nightmare. Never would recommend that product, but I have to take off the entire injection system to change it, so I'm dealing with it for now. But the vent system, it's working. Where do I get all the great hats from? It's funny how often I see this question. There is no particular store where I source these hats. I also don't buy them online. I'm always on the lookout for cool hats, and when I see one, I try it on. If it fits, I buy it. How long does it take me to drive 100 kilometers? This depends very much on the road that I'm driving. For example, last year when I went up to Bill and Jan's place up at Fisham Lake, that's 20 kilometers and it took me 2 entire days. Long term, what's the plan for this channel or goals of adventures? Kind of covered this. I have, at this point in this odd career, I have a list of adventures and recommendations that could fill my entire life. So if the industry stays strong and the channel stays entertaining, I'll ride this out as long as possible and hopefully share a whole lot of enjoyment with everybody. Have I considered a live session where viewers can ask questions in real time? I've considered it, but again, this was never really supposed to be the Dustin Porter show, so if I do a live somewhere, I would probably do a live of what's happening somewhere at the destination that I am at, not so much of myself. Yeah, great question. Is there a story behind the claw that's hanging from my mirror? Yes, there is. That is 2 talons from an owl, and my father found that when he was a young boy. A tree had fallen down somewhere in a field, and the owl was there underneath the tree, and my father took it and put it in the freezer. And then I guess maybe had forgotten about it, and then my grandma found it and she didn't want it in the freezer, so my dad cut the talons off of it, dried them out, and they were in this truck when he had it as a service truck for the logging company. So growing up, I always seen them hanging there. And when I hit the road with the motorhome, I ended up grabbing the talons out of the truck because it was just sitting for all those years. And then when I went back into this truck, they belonged back in there. So that's the story. And that's the end of the questions. Holy smokes, got through them all. Thanks for your questions, everybody. And thanks for all the recommendations. Thanks for all the support. And Emmy and I have been talking about maybe doing these questions kind of as shorts. We've been incorporating a lot more shorts in the channel, and people seem to be really enjoying it. So if you have more questions, please fire them down in the comments and we'll get through them in the shorts. Thanks, everybody.